live on a planet of water. Water captivates our senses. Water is fun. No water, no life. There are regions in the world that show how we can respect and use water better in the future. Think of the south of Spain, sea and sun, especially sun. But Andalusia has a lot more to offer. 24 nature parks with unique landscapes and rare animal species. Less well known is that Europe's only desert is to be found here. Here, of all places where water is in short supply, vegetables are grown for the whole of Europe. The water consumption is enormous and poses a challenge for the whole region. But there are people living and working here who have found extraordinary solutions to the water problem by returning to traditions established during the time of the Moors, or by turning to high tech and science. But will there be enough water for both agriculture and nature in Andalusia? Inescapable for any understanding of the culture of Andalusia, the Alhambra, enthroned on a hill above the city of Granada. Looking at this filigree architecture, it's hard to imagine that there was originally just a fortress here. In the 13th century, the Moors began to turn it into a palace complex with lush gardens and sparkling fountains. The most famous of them is the Fountain of Lions. What most visitors never realize, though, is that the Alhambra is also a triumph of water engineering. Although there's very little water in the region, the Moors created an oasis here, like those of their Arab homeland. Conservator and leading authority on the Alhambra, Jesus Bermúdez López has devoted himself to studying the Moorish period and Islam.
Islamic culture venerates and respects water. It's probably the most important element of daily life.
Jesus Bermúdez López has been working in this unique place for 30 years. He knows that the Alhambra didn't have any water originally, not until the Moors built a 6-kilometer-long system of canals to bring water from the mountains. The canal system leads first to the Generalife, the summer palace of the sultans, which stands above the Alhambra. The mountain water first irrigates the gardens. Then the water flows through the Acequia Real, the royal canal, and continues via a system of streams, canals, and aqueducts. and finally into the gardens of the Alhambra. In all this, the Moors were careful to waste as little water as possible.
Because in the Islamic world, water is the meaning of life. Water is the origin of life, and it cleanses both the body and the soul. Even the holy text of Islam, the Quran, speaks of paradise as gardens in which water flows.
The all-encompassing importance that water had for the Moors is still appreciable today. The irrigation of the gardens is highly sophisticated. The Moors used the sloping location and created terraces through which the water could flow downhill. The individual pools are laid out so that dirt sinks to the bottom while the water flows on. So the water is purified, rather as in a modern water treatment plant. And that's not all. The mirroring effects and light reflections of the water were deliberately exploited as an aesthetic design medium. All this was part of the Moors' planning when they built the Alhambra, as well as the spiritual significance that water had for them.
En ese sentido, la fuente de los leones que está aquí a mi espalda.
The fountains of lions should also be understood in this context. On the one hand, it's a functional element, a fountain, but it also has a poem inscribed around the edge, written by one of the leading poets of the Nasrid dynasty, Ibn Zamrak, which explains in beautiful, metaphorical language the meaning of the fountain. He writes of water as liquid silver.
The liquid silver of the fountain is flowing once again, thanks to a painstaking restoration of the ingenious Moorish water system. Just 100 kilometers away, the picture's very different. No oasis, just dusty dryness. But the Moors were here too. When they conquered the Iberian Peninsula 1,300 years ago, they brought their knowledge of the Arabian desert with them. They built wells like this one. There would once have been a huge wheel in the top of the well fitted with scoops. When you moved the wheel, the scoops brought water to the surface. From there, it would be led via a channel into a cistern. The channel slopes gently so that water flowed naturally into the cistern. Inside, the water would be stored until needed. Despite the dryness, the Moors were able to conduct agriculture and animal husbandry on a large scale. But that was nothing compared with the extent of production today. In eastern Andalusia, around the town of Almeria, there are greenhouses as far as the eye can see, all under plastic sheeting. The area is known as the Mar del Plástico, the Sea of Plastic. In the 1960s, when the first greenhouses were erected, conditions were ideal. About 3,000 hours of sunshine a year and apparently inexhaustible groundwater. Nowadays, the greenhouses cover an area of around 35,000 hectares, which is getting on for 50,000 football pitches. Every year, the farmers produce literally tons of vegetables for the whole of Europe. There's very little rain here, so vegetables can only be grown with artificial watering. As a result, the underground aquifers, once huge natural stores of groundwater, are now almost empty. But things can be done differently. Close by is a village in the mountains which is cultivating ancient traditions, including being careful with water. Up here, there's more rain than in the sea of plastic, but the villagers complain that there's less water every year. One farmer who's battling with the water shortage is Paco Mingoranci. He was born here and for a while ran a hamburger restaurant in the sea of plastic. When it went bust, he came back to his village, Messina Bombaron. The Spaniards were not the first people to discover the fertile land in the mountains, but the Moors before them. They started planting mulberry trees here in the 8th century and succeeded in producing silk. Paco is a farmer, like his father. But Paco has converted to organic agriculture. He's convinced that it's the only way to save his homeland. He not only learned arable and livestock husbandry from his father, but also everything about the special characteristics of this mountain region, the Alpujarras. By 1492, the Catholic kings had reconquered the whole of Spain. It was in these mountains that the last of the Moors took refuge.
They were very intelligent people who made optimum use of water. In the Alhambra, just like here.
In order to store meltwater and rain, the Moors also constructed a system of canals here. In spring, when the snow on the mountain peaks melted, the water was led down the mountain in channels. They then deliberately let it soak into the ground, which stored it like a sponge. Weeks later, the water would re-emerge further down the mountain in the form of springs. So even in summer, when there was hardly any rain, the Moors in the mountains still had water. The further down the mountain the water ran, the more the canals branched out to water the terraces in the individual valleys. It's thought the total length of the original canal system was 2,500 kilometers. Here, one of the main channels transports the water very slowly downhill. The flow can be dammed with large flat stones, sand or earth, and diverted into the individual plots of land. The local farmers are still using this system today. The Moors saw water as a public asset which everyone was entitled to. Irrigation associations grew up, which are still responsible for distributing the water according to need and land area. Paco captures the water in an embalser or reservoir, just like the Moors did before they were driven out of Andalusia altogether and had to leave the mountains. Spain was to be made Christian, so Christian settlers were brought to the Alpujarras.
80
to 85 families came from the lowlands to settle in the abandoned areas, but 3 Moorish families remained here in the village, on the express orders of the Catholic kings. Their job was to explain the water distribution system
the ownership structure, and the type of agriculture to the new settlers.
The Moorish irrigation system is still ensuring that all the farmers in the Alpujarras have water even when the thaw is over. In recent decades, though, there hasn't been as much snow in winter as there used to be. Temperatures have been rising. Climate change is affecting this region too, and water is getting short. To be as economical with it as possible, Paco uses a modern drip watering system for the last stretch on the way from the reservoir to his fields. The Moors had simply flooded the fields, but nowadays the water is too precious. With the drip feed system, Paco can target the water precisely to his vegetables and save the rest. Paco does not use any pesticide or artificial fertilizers. The ecosystem also benefits from this with its insects. But he does without chemicals because it's healthier, and not only for the vegetables. The water flows further on downhill and is used by other people. Thanks to Paco's method, they get uncontaminated water. Paco's ecological cultivation also embodies the legacy of the Moors. They respected the natural conditions and built their terraces just wide enough so that hardly any soil was washed away during irrigation. Some farmers in Paco's village want to level the terraces so they can bring in machines. But Paco has opted for manual labor and only plants as much as the narrow terraces can hold. Thanks to irrigation, Paco achieves several harvests a year, and his organically grown vegetables fetch higher prices on the market. But the small area under cultivation is not enough to live off, so he works half-time at the town hall. Nevertheless, Paco staunchly believes in the agriculture of the Alpujarras and in Moorish irrigation.
We're still using their system. If we didn't retain it, the Alpujarras would not be green today, but arid.
This can already be seen not far from Paco's fields. Where the Alpujarras are no longer farmed, the terraces crumble and the soil dries out. The result is erosion. About 100 kilometers to the east, the ground is in even worse condition. This is the Tabernas Desert, not a semi-desert, but the only full-blown desert in Europe. Millions of years ago, this was the seabed. As the sea withdrew, the sun, rain, and wind carved out these canyons and hills. It's Europe's driest region. Just a stone's throw away is the Sea of Greenhouses. Back in the 1960s, this was still a poor region. Nowadays, it's one of the most prosperous in Spain, all thanks to irrigation. In earlier days, the farmers hardly watered their fields at all and grew plants that didn't need much water, like olive trees. Today, the vegetables grown here for the European market need a lot of water, like tomatoes and courgettes. Manuel Garcia Queiro and his brother farm around 8 hectares in the Sea of Plastic. At first sight, there don't seem to be any water problems here. But Manuel constantly has to test how dry the soil is to decide whether and how much to water.
Nothing is more precious than water. Nothing else. Nothing material. Immaterial may be love, but apart from that, nothing.
Manuel's fellow workers enrich the water with nutrients, so it also fertilizes the plants. After so many years of cultivation, the soil is exhausted. Manuel uses a modern pump installation so he can precisely control the amount of water and the watering time. Instead of flooding or sprinkling the fields, Manuel also uses drip irrigation for his plants. He tells us that most of the farmers in the Sea of Plastic are now being economical in the use of the precious commodity. There's just not enough water available for any other irrigation method. Although the groundwater is exhausted, the acreage producing vegetables is still growing. For ages, vegetables were grown conventionally here. Chemical fertilizers for the plants and insecticides against pests. Then, some years ago, there was a scandal. Dangerous levels of pesticides were found on Spanish sweet peppers. Sales collapsed. Since then, many farmers have gone over to biological pest control. Natural predators are being introduced. Manuel says it's working well, but the water problem still has to be solved.
There aren't any rivers here, so when it doesn't rain, the soil and the groundwater level don't recover. We live in a desert-like zone, so there are long periods of drought. At some point, the aquifer becomes overused. To conserve the groundwater, we started using desalination.
The water from this desalination plant covers part of his water needs. It's only just gone into operation and represents many farmers' hopes for the future. It turns seawater into drinking water. When the plant is working to capacity, it will supply water for 8,000 hectares, around a quarter of the area under cultivation. The downside is that it uses fossil fuels, which pollute the atmosphere.
Desalination plants require an enormous amount of electricity, so the water problem becomes an energy problem.
But solar energy can also produce electricity instead of the present polluting coal and oil. In the Solar Research Center near Almeria, Guillermo Zaragoza is looking for new ways to provide the farmers with water. He's using sea salt and water to produce artificial seawater. He's researching a method of desalinating seawater while protecting the climate. He heats the artificial seawater with solar energy until it evaporates. The unit has a membrane which allows only pure steam to pass through. The salt and harmful trace elements are left behind. The result is distilled water, to which he adds minerals again before it's used.
Estuve trabajando casi 10 años en astrofísica.
I worked in astrophysics for nearly 10 years, and my last project was looking for water on Mars. Then suddenly the question occurred to me, is it better to look for water on Mars or in Almeria? I was born there and want to live here because it's a wonderful place, but there are enormous water problems.
In the meantime, some prototypes using solar collectors have been developed for climate-friendly desalination. Guillermo believes tests can soon start in the sea of plastic. The initial talks with the farmers' associations have gone well.
In a few years, we'll have sustainable desalination of seawater in Almeria. Then people will no longer use groundwater, but water that's desalinated using solar energy.
If Guillermo's plans work out, it could change the whole of vegetable cultivation in Almeria. But can this happen fast enough to quench the enormous thirst of the sea of plastic? The cultivated area continues to grow. Andalusia needs other solutions to the water problem. For some time, researchers have been talking about wastewater from the towns. A lot of wastewater is produced by cities like Almeria, which could be used to irrigate farmland.
The problem with agriculture is the enormous amount of water that would need to be disinfected. The problem is the amount. If we were going to use water from a treatment plant, that still contains pathogen residues. You just can't chlorinate such vast volumes of water or sterilize them with radiation. It's very complicated to disinfect so much water.
Pilar Fernandez is one of Guillermo's colleagues in the research center in the desert. She and her team are investigating how large amounts of water can be freed from germs efficiently and cost-effectively. Pilar, too, is trying to solve the farmers' water problem with the help of the sun. For this experiment, she's adding a very small amount of hydrogen peroxide to the wastewater in a bid to speed up disinfection. Now the researchers can only wait. The sun takes over from here. The water repeatedly runs through special glass tubes. The idea is for the sun's rays combined with the hydrogen peroxide to kill the bacteria. After 3 or 4 hours, the water is ready. Pilar says that this method is healthier than using chlorine, which can produce harmful byproducts. But is this water now really pure enough to be used in agriculture? Pilar and her team are trying to find out in the test greenhouse. Plants that are eaten raw in particular can become breeding grounds for bacteria if they're given untreated wastewater.
First, we identify the pathogens in wastewater because the water spreads the germs onto the plants that we eat. If we succeed in killing the germs, we'll shout, "Eureka!" and try to develop a large-scale application.
But first, they have to be sure that no germs have actually been sprayed on the plants destined for the table. If it works, this method could also be applied elsewhere, such as in developing countries. for the moment, they're concentrating on the water problem in Andalusia. Ecologically treated wastewater and desalinated seawater could provide solutions for the sea of plastic and conserve groundwater at the same time. But this can only happen if everyone sticks to the rules. That's not the case in western Andalusia, on the border to Portugal. Here too there's farming on the grand scale, but a lot of farmers take water illegally. Felipe Fuentesas from the WWF Environmental Organization has been combating water theft for years.
Over there, they're growing strawberries. The farmers draw on groundwater, largely without permission. And the period of irrigation is long, from October to June.
9 months of irrigation, with the only break in summer when it's too hot for the plants in Andalusia. Felipe says that there was once a forest here. That was better for the sandy soil than today's fruit growing, because another great problem is soil erosion.
This is the Arroyo de la Cañada Creek. It's silted up, owing to soil erosion. In addition, pipelines channel off the water from the creek. And here is a well right next to the creek. The bank is full of basins and wells that are totally illegal. No wells are allowed near the creek. The water that we take for agriculture is stolen from the Doñana National Park.
This is just one of over 1,000 illegal wells in the area. Water is also illegally pumped from the river into basins. The result? Where the stream should actually run under the road, there's just a dry bed. The groundwater level is also sinking, and that's threatening a neighboring area, the Doñana National Park. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's an earthly paradise, still, especially in spring when there's water. The park is one of the most important wetlands in Europe, mainly because of the marshland, the stretches of land that are regularly flooded. Every year the park provides a resting place and source of food for around 6 million migrating birds. The western swamp hen is one of the visitors, raising its chicks here in spring. Fully grown, it's half a meter tall. The glossy ibis can also be spotted here. It finds its food, insect larvae, shellfish and crustaceans, only in marshland. The Doñana National Park is an ideal habitat. The park is also home to endangered species like the Spanish imperial eagle. Only around 400 breeding pairs remain. Here, the eagles and their young are safe. Like the imperial eagle, the black-winged kite is one of Europe's resident birds. Unlike the migratory birds, they stay here all year round. The shrubland in the Doñana Park houses an absolute rarity, the rarest species of cat in Europe, the Iberian lynx. Here it's hunting its favorite prey. The park is also subjected to the hot summers of Andalusia. The whole landscape suffers from drought. The lagoons and marshland dry out, and it's been getting worse year by year. In the past, the soil was kept at least slightly moist, in summer too, by the groundwater. Now, agriculture bordering the park is literally cutting off its water. The WWF Environmental Organization estimates that groundwater levels could recover in 30 to 60 years' time, but only if a start is made now on regulating and monitoring water extraction. But there are other ways to preserve this paradise. Felipe Fuentosas is working with volunteers on the reforestation of the national park as part of the WWF's long-term program for a number of reforestation areas. He's trying to counter the illegal slash-and-burn activity which has turned forest into farmland all round the park. Today, the volunteers are working in a reforestation area where they planted new trees the previous year. But not all of them have survived the heat and dryness of their first year. The withered ones are being replaced. The aim is to create a continuous chain of forests to provide the wildlife of the Doñana Park with a protected corridor through the farmland. But the trees are equally important from the water point of view.
The trees are vital for the Doñana Park. Their roots prevent erosion. The forest also filters the rainwater before it runs into the rivers, so it actually improves the water quality.
To avoid the trees also taking water from the national park, indigenous species are planted, like the wild olive, home oak and cork oak. They're well adapted to extreme temperatures and don't need much water. Apart from the indigenous trees, there are some agricultural plants that cope well with drought. Instead of strawberries, for instance, the farmers could plant grapevines. They could make an income from wine without endangering the national park. North of the park lies a wine-growing region with no illegal wells. Winemaker Antonio Rodriguez Endrina grows vines as his forebears have for generations. He knows that his plants are good for the arid soil, and that helps the park.
I'm no engineer. I can only pass on what our elders always told us. We have to try and hold our sandy soil together as much as possible. How did they do that in the past? With a net-like mass of roots in the soil. The roots of our vines don't go deep, but lie close to the surface and hold the soil together. That's why there have always been vines on mountain slopes.
Antonio belongs to a cooperative which has just gone over to organic wine growing. That means that neither fertilizer nor pesticides end up in the groundwater. But how do they water their plants here?
We don't. We operate dry farming here, partly because of our water problems. Also, watering would produce more grapes, which we don't want, because that would affect the quality of the wine. So we're not interested in irrigation. We can't do it and don't want it. What we want is to maintain the natural balance of the region in which we've lived since time immemorial.
About an hour's drive away, on the other side of the national park, is where ecologist Miguel Medialdea works. He's also doing his bit to preserve the Doñana park in his own way. Where he works, surprisingly, there's water in abundance, even in summer, when many other regions of Andalusia are parched. At first sight, it looks like a nature reserve, but it's actually a fish farm. But it's not the standard sort of aquaculture, where it's all about producing as many fish as possible. Conventional fish farms keep the fish crowded together in a tight space. The large amount of animal excrement pollutes the water enormously, and that then flows back into the sea or the river where the water came from. Here it's different. Miguel makes sure the fish live in low concentration, better for the fish and the environment. But where does the water come from? Is it fresh water taken from the national park?
We use brackish water drawn from the nearby Guadalquivir estuary. That means there's no quarrel with the local community about drinking water. We don't use any drinking water at all. For us, it's important to breed fish that are used to brackish water.
The estuary of the river Guadalquivir borders directly on the fish farm. Seawater here mixes with fresh water. The resulting brackish water is fed through a system of canals to the fish farm. A total of 3,200 hectares is underwater, nearly the area of 4,500 football pitches. It wasn't always like this. Up into the 1980s, the wetland was deliberately drained to create farmland. The wetland was lost to wildlife. It took the vast fish farm to reverse that. The heart of the farm is the pump and its sluices. It pumps the water completely automatically into the 300-kilometre canal network and floods the ponds. It controls how much water is taken from the estuary. When it rains, for example, the sluices close automatically, not just because of the amount of water, but also the salt content. For the various fish species, the water mustn't be too salty, nor have too little salt. That's why Miguel's colleague, Manolo, regularly checks the salinity. 11.8 grams of salt. That's within the optimum salinity range. Seawater contains nearly 3 times as much salt. The incredible volume of 1 million cubic meters of water is drawn from the estuary every day and pumped through the fish farm's canals. This is how Miguel and his colleagues ensure there's enough oxygen in the ponds. The fish farm is just as attractive for migratory birds as a natural wetland. The major difference is that the fish farm has water in summer as well, when the neighbouring Doñana park has dried out. That's when flamingos find food, such as algae and small crustaceans here. Other bird species also eat the fish from the farm. This is accepted as part of the natural order. The bird resting place, though, is just a byproduct of the ecological fish farm. Since the fish live in low concentration, there's far less environmental pollution from excrement. The fish are also healthier and don't need antibiotics like those in conventional fish farms. It's principally sea bass that live here. But today there's an order for mullet, another species that's bred here. Fishing only takes place when there are orders. It's carried out by local fishermen who have found work here, in a region where unemployment is around 30% of the workforce. The fish are transported in containers filled with iced water.
Aquí, sin embargo, we
are restoring what's been lost, a plant world and an environment as they originally were, similar to those in the Doñana National Park. At the same time, we're creating new values. That, I think, is the true face of sustainability.
Sustainability includes plants on the banks filtering the water as it's fed back to the river by canal. This means hardly any residues of fish excrement are left in the water. Miguel says the water quality is regularly checked by independent testers. By the time it reaches the river, it has to be at least as good as before. The water cycle is complete. This is a place of work that's good for humans and for the environment. Miguel also sees a further dimension.
Personalmente,
For me personally, it's important to work here because I believe it inspires other people. Sometimes the daily routine makes you forget where you're at. But when people come here and are interested in our production concept, when I get emails from Australia or the USA asking about what we're doing here, then you see that your work has had an effect. And that feels good.
Andalusia has a lot to offer which could be an example for other countries. The careful use of brackish water for fish rearing, for instance. Intensive agriculture is being given new sources of water, and high-tech research could even help solve the water problems of poorer countries.
All around the world, wherever there is no clean water and people have to irrigate their crops with dirty water. That's an urgent problem in Nepal, for example, or Vietnam or Ghana, because people there irrigate their fields with untreated wastewater.
The history of Andalusia also points the way towards responsible water management. The special relationship of the Moors to water stands as exemplary.
Water was part of every aspect of their lives, from their food on the simplest level to a symbol of their religion. For the Moors, water was such an essential that it was carefully collected and could not be wasted.
This could all help feed the world's ever-expanding population without bleeding nature dry.